Hi, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and I was put on to Berserk Boy by some Mega Man fans on Twitter, and while it wasn't nearly as Mega Man-esque as I was expecting, I'm very thankful that they did. Sure, it borrows pretty heavily from ZX for its main tenet, but the gameplay feels a lot faster and physical, without a lot of time to simply stop and think. I've gone through the game a few times now, and I'll probably do several more runs in the future, but at this point, I think I know the gist enough to lay out my thoughts and perhaps even recommend it to people. I'm a bit excited, so let's get into it. You play as K, a member of the Resistance, tasked with protecting the general populace from Shades, malevolent beings spawned out of dark matter. He has a techie friend named Dizzy and gains a magical bird friend named P.O.E.M, and has to fuse with objects called Berserk Orbs to combat the evil ambitions of a scientist named Genos, who wants to harness the orbs for himself. You get one in the intro stage, but Genos' people still have 4, so it's a fight to reclaim them all. That's the long and short of it, and to be honest, the writing is one of the only things I'm not terribly enthusiastic about when it comes to Berserk Boy. It's kinda silly and cute enough, but by the end, I always have a lot of questions, and while I normally wouldn't mind, the game has plenty of dialogue in it. Just enough to not be intrusive, but enough that I feel like I should have a better understanding of things and not be questioning if there's any major difference between the regular and good endings. I could break it down for you, but I don't want to spoil it. I will give it that the twist near the end is pretty well executed, but for the most part, I'm glad that I was able to skip cutscenes on subsequent playthroughs. The game's main gimmick is that you have transformations, of which there are 5. The main one is Lightning Justice, which can slam into things to tag them, then hit them with a follow-up blast of electricity. You can just tap and zap, or build up a string of connections and blast them all at once. After air dashing, you need to either touch a solid surface to reset, or if you connected with an enemy or obstacle, you can dash again immediately. So there's a lot of points in the game where baddies are spread out over treacherous terrain and you have to leapfrog across them to get to the other side. Its Berserk attack, think special move, complete with special gauge, has you dashing a short distance forward, then back, delivering a good bit of damage. This form focuses heavy on combos and movement, and is a lot of fun to use. It has great utility, is the one you're likely to use the most, and is a good fallback if there isn't another form that's more obviously suited for the situation, so it's great that this is the one you get first. The next is Flame Drill, which can rake things with its claws, spin forward like a mini twister, dive under the ground to swim just below the surface for a few brief moments before violently popping back up, and drill through certain types of dirt. Its Berserk attack is pretty much just Leaf Shield, but with fire. I like this form, but I'm a bit too clumsy using it, normally taking some damage myself when trying to attack, so I don't make as much use of it as I wish I did. Then you get Ice Kunai, which can hang from some surfaces and fixtures, Spam Kunai, and dash dance through enemies, going through them back and forth as if slapping them. Its Berserk attack has you slamming the ground to send a wave of ice sprouting up. I loved Model PX back in the day, and this plays very similarly, so it was an instant favorite of mine and one that I probably overused at points. Then there's Soaring Wind, which can fly freely. It's a little weak in the attack department, it having a shield that reflects projectiles that'll probably kill whatever fired them off originally, but it is reactionary, and while you can fire the shield off, it spirals around you, making it a little hard to use. Still though, with how smoothly it controls, you can easily fly around most enemies, so attacking isn't as important, and making it offensively strong as well would have only made Soaring Wind more broken than it already is, so it's not really a complaint. I definitely abused this one. Oh, and its Berserk move has you tossing out 4 shields that bounce off walls. Lastly, there's Mind Buster, which can lock onto enemies and some obstacles, then blast them even if they're incorporeal. It also has a floaty double jump. And honestly, this is the only one that I'm lacking enthusiasm on. Combat just kind of hinges on holding a button, then releasing, and the rest of the game is so fast paced that swapping to something without a dash feels like you're really hampering me. Not only that, but it has some of the lamest obstacles, either doors that you just need to blast through or enemies that only it can shoot, so that a lot of times, I just wind up swapping to this, shooting whatever, then immediately swapping back to what I was using before. There's even some platforms that you need to scan to make solid that I typically just use Soaring Wind to fly over. That said, it is the last one you get, so you don't need to engage with it too much, which certainly makes it more tolerable. I also get the impression that it's the form packing the most power, so maybe I should try using it more to learn the ins and outs. I might get some backsass on this one. Anyway, the other 4 are great though, so having one that feels like a dud right at the end isn't really that big of a deal. and its Berserk attack has you blasting everything around you. There's one other form, your basic human self, where you can do simple stuff with the help of your bird pal P.O.E.M, like dash attacks and foot stomps to clear blocks below you. Oh yeah, most of your forms can do the foot stomps. Though I'm not the damn manual, I'm not gonna tell you everything. Anyway, unlike certain other games with a similar gimmick, your basic form is really only used in the tutorial, and you don't need to use it once outside of it. No contriving stupid situations where you need to swap back to it to talk to a certain person or crawl under a ledge. It's still there though if you're feeling gutsy, which could be fun for people looking to challenge themselves. Anyway, there's 3 ways to change form. The shoulder switch will let you change fast, one button will pause the action and let you manually choose a form, and this is also the only way to return to your mundane self, and there's also these pads that will automatically swap you to a specific form. This is not only a good way to single out what version of yourself you want to be using, but there's also some sections that require an immediate change from one to another, so these save you from fumbling around trying to pull the right one up. There's 3 main types of power-ups. Hearts refill your health, simple enough, and while you can refill your Berserk gauge through combat, these yellow tokens will fill it up faster. The most common type, and probably the most important, are the blue spheres with lightning bolts on them. Each form has certain abilities, normally the movement-based ones, that drain the blue gauge. While laying off these will naturally refill said bar, grabbing blue spheres will replenish it, even when you're moving. While this can benefit any of your different forms, the 2 that really depend on it are Flame Drill when it's burrowing through dirt, and Soaring Wind when you need to fly. You don't really want to run out of either while doing so you need to be collecting them while moving, which will not only keep you going, but also helps direct your path. Neat! These balls also have a secondary purpose though. They serve as the game's currency. In between missions, you can buy upgrades such as more health, powered up attacks, more flight time for Soaring Wind, or a trick to temporarily up Ice Kunai's movement speed, to name a few. Since most of these forms are already pretty good, these upgrades can make them downright busted, and in some places, you can use one form to cheese a section designed for another. So start saving up. Then there's also a score system. It judges you based on time, max combo, and how many times you died. The scoring isn't too strict, and it doesn't seem to affect anything other than ego, so you don't need to stress about it. And of course, while most are just the basic letter grades, it does go up to S, which isn't unattainable with a bit of practice. The stages come in sets of 3, with 5 areas for a total of 15, along with a tutorial that's just there for the intro and a secret 16th stage if you do a good job. And these levels do not care how you think they should be set up. Each has 4 checkpoints that you can warp between once you activate them, the first of which is where you enter the area at. Touching one will refill your health, as well as deposit any currency you found, and each revisit, you start fresh, since it break the grading system if you could just jump right to the end to speedrun things. And here's the part where conventional wisdom doesn't matter. Some stages, you go from left to right, passing through the checkpoints in order until you get to the boss and clear the level. Some of them start you out at the end and you need to explore the level to unlock the door right there in front of you. Others will have you beat the boss like normal, then keep going for a while. And many will have side paths, sometimes leading to collectibles, some alternate paths, and which is the correct way will not always be obvious. Sometimes I would go left first, assuming that the way forward was right, only to get to the next checkpoint a few minutes later. Other times, I'd take a path blocked off by an obstacle that I didn't originally have the right power to clear, and somehow still wind up where I was supposed to, without needing to double back. It can be really hard to keep things straight, but given that exploring for secrets is a big aspect of this game, I can't hold it against it. There's plenty of times you see an obstacle that you can't interact with yet, so you are encouraged to revisit each section to find stuff you missed. And since the game is linear, you can expect this to be taken into account as well. After getting a new Berserk Orb, you can expect to see a lot of sections that require its abilities to clear. No need to wait for endgame when you're guaranteed to have everything. And like I said, there will be some stuff you can't muscle through yet, so take note of what was where, or just come back and take a second look once you have more at your disposal. I've seen some call it a Metroidvania, but since each stage is self-contained rather than everything being continuous, I don't think that's quite right, though I do see the comparison. As for some of the obstacles, there are spikes, but they won't kill you, at least not in one touch. Pits, on the other hand, will. A lot of them have warning skulls over them, but not all of them will, which kinda bugs me. Early on, I thought the unmarked ones might have some secrets if you jumped into them, and the warnings not being there were a clever way to see if you were paying attention, like in some Shantae titles, but nope, still killed me. Not only that, but you don't have to fall into them to die. If you get close enough to the edge, you're tractor beamed the rest of the way down. I just wish there were more consistency. From what I've seen, for the most part, just avoid jumping into any holes. If there is a secret you can jump down into, there should be a tell, like a power-up, breakable block, or ladder leading down. I haven't 100%ed the game yet, so I am kind of worried that there still might be a few oddball places where you have to take a leap of faith, which does kind of bother me and would be kind of crappy if they did. And again, it's about consistency. If they didn't want to put in any warnings, that'd be fine, but since they did, I kind of feel like all death pits should get them. It's a small annoyance, though still an annoyance. To get into the collectibles, outside of power-ups, there are two other main types. One are resistance members you need to rescue. Most stages have 10, but a few have 20. Finding 60% in a stage will unlock a bonus door that can have power-ups, berserk medals, or more resistance members, which feels a little backwards, like using a key to unlock another key, but hey, getting all of them will unlock an EX stage. Each regular level has one, so 15 total, and each is just kind of a time trial, usually testing something you had to do in the regular level, but more extreme. Haven't done all of them, but I liked a few of them, though there were one or two that were lame. Like the one that was a maze, since all you'd need to do to get a good time on that one would be to memorize it. My big complaint with these is if you die, you get thrown back to the start, but without your time getting reset. If you want a fresh start, you need to exit the level, go back to base, then reselect it, all with a good bit of loading. A restart option in stage would go a long way, for all the levels, but especially the special ones, though I think they're a nice addition. Then there's the Berserk medals I mentioned. Each stage has 5, and like currency, you need to drop it off at a checkpoint to properly claim them, so you need to be especially careful while carrying one. As for what they do, well, you need 50 of them, out of a possible 75, to access the true ending, so keep an eye out and also keep in mind which stages seems like they'd be the easiest to find more in while backtracking. There's a pretty good spread on how stuff is hidden. Some you just need to keep an eye out for, some require you keeping an eye out for stuff like ladders and tubes instead, some need revisits, some you can see but can't reach unless you come at them from a different angle, so you need spatial awareness, some require exploration. They can be fun to track down, at least up to a point. A few special notes, there's some elevators, specifically the green ones I think, that just automatically go up when you step on them, so be careful if you wanted to run past them instead. There are a few rooms that will lock you in and send several waves of enemies at you. There's a decent variety of baddies, and I like the roster and the little rushes are good for getting your combos down, so I rarely minded these, just a few times that they felt like they went on for a little long. There's a few sections where the gameplay changes, like one where you do a slowed down version of the Ride Chaser, and 2 parts where the game becomes an arcade shooter. There's also a few places where it feels like the game is trolling you, like this one part where you dig under spikes, go do a few things on the next screen, and when you come back, if you don't remember to be already underground, you'll walk back into them. Not sure how intentional some of this is, but if the game meant to test whether you remember how you came in a few minutes ago, congratulations, I didn't, you got me. One last location to mention is the base. You got your room, Dizzy's room, the lab where you upgrade your forms, and the command center, where you select missions. The rest is just kind of empty, gradually filling up with NPCs as you rescue people, and each offering you flavor text, semi-randomized, but most of them seeming to share the same sets of dialogue. For the most part, you only need to worry about the command center and lab, and you can warp to the major locations, so the base is largely skippable. I say, but then there are some intermission missions. Once per set of levels, where you have to run around and take out intruders. And these suck. I largely like the level design here, but Sweet Christmas, just running around playing hide and seek with a bunch of random enemies is so dull. The enemy wave rooms are fine, but since there's no indication of what is where, you just have to make sure you hit everything until you get the all clear. And heaven forbid you fail to finish something off and you have to check through everything all over again. Really, it feels like they programmed the base in, realized there was no reason to engage with it, and contrived a reason to force you to. It sucks, breaks up the pace, and just keeps you from doing the actual enjoyable parts of the game. But hey, maybe this only annoys me so much because of how fun the rest of the game is. Oh, and the post game requires you to find an object in an area connected to the base and carry it back to a specific room. When you get there, do not warp to the room. Physically walk it back, since the teleport drops the item. Really easy to avoid, but really infuriating if you don't know about it. It soured one of my playthroughs, so please, let me make this easier on you with a warning. Most stages will have a sub-boss or boss. Spoilers for most of them ahead. The formula typically goes Zone 1, sub-boss. Zone 2, same sub-boss, but slightly bigger and tougher. Zone 3, actual boss with a Berserk Orb on the line. Area 4 has only one sub-boss though, and Area 5 only the final boss, but not the final boss. I can kinda take or leave the sub-bosses. The first set is good. They're the sort that aren't too hard, just enough to ease you into things and get you used to movement and combat. The second and third sets, though, have a lot of times where you just have to dodge rather than attack, and enemies that are invulnerable at points where you have to pick the best moments to counter are fair game. Plenty of others do it. I guess that since Berserk Boy is such a fast-paced title that I don't want to slow down and wait for the turtle to stop shooting me. Oh, and since the fourth one-off sub-boss is a little more unique, I won't spoil that one, I'll just say that it's kinda fun. The actual bosses, though, are where combat really shines. Each have to come at a different way. Flame Drill is just a matter of hurting him more than he hurts you. A good starting boss. Ice Kunai moves around a lot, so you need to keep up, attacking when you can without leaving yourself vulnerable. Soaring Wind stays mostly at the top of the screen, with her weapon defending her, so that ranged attacks are actually better for most of the fight. And Mindbuster is invulnerable for most of the fight, so you just kinda need to desperately attack him during the stints where damage is a possibility. Listen, it's fine. I already talked about why this is okay with the sub-bosses, and I already said that I don't like Mindbuster, so that just takes me to my next point. Since each has a Berserk Orb you'll get upon victory, it's really exciting to fight them and get a preview of what your reward will be. Sure, the boss is able to do more than you can, but still, just seeing what element and the basic type of attack they'll use, what their strength seems to be, how you'll look wearing it, is very cool. Or annoying in Mindbuster's case. So yeah, see a boss and start getting excited, thinking about the possibilities. It's like fighting a boss in Mega Man, but better since you get a whole new wardrobe and gameplay change. Each boss will also use a Berserk attack when they get low on health, so just be careful for that. Also worth mentioning is that some enemies and bosses have weaknesses. If you hit them with the right power, a little box with an exclamation point pops up. I haven't figured out all of them, and I typically just use whatever I'm the most comfortable with, since that probably tops bonus damage, though it's not a bad idea to experiment if you're having trouble. Oh, and since the game is still pretty new, I won't spoil the final boss, I'll just say that it's a neat fight, though given their gimmick, it was a little embarrassing when I got my movements down and started taking them out before they could get through all their attack patterns. Silly. The visuals are what you see. Cute and pixely, but a fine pixely. The sort of thing that would be too much for the SNES, but would work on a PS1. The overall look is somewhere between a Saturday morning cartoon and anime. The different costumes and some of the characters feel like the sort of thing you could make an action figure line out of, and it has a very fun, goofy kind of vibe. Not that anime is immune to this sort of thing, and I am reminded slightly of Dragon Ball with a few of the designs. Like Dizzy makes me think of Bulma, specifically her Namek outfit, and the Commander reminds me of King Vegeta somehow. There's a short anime opening, if you sit on the title screen for a bit, further fueling these impressions. The environments also have some nice details to them. Like the Torii Gates in the ice area, we have some nice looking clouds behind the Sky Armada, and the rundown buildings make a nice contrast to the plant bits in the forest area. On the whole, I'd say it's a pleasant game to look at, but if I can make two complaints, when you transfer into a level, you get a blank screen, other than the word loading. While this isn't the biggest deal, loading screens tend to not be the most exciting, the game does have some nice stills for some of the cutscenes, so I kinda wish that they would have either inserted some of those in here, or just took some random in-game screenshots, rather than having you just stare into the void. And the other is, when you collect Berserk medals, you get a pretty sizable text box that takes up the bottom of the screen for a second or two. And holy crap, that can be really in the way, especially if you're in the middle of a fancy maneuver when you grab one. I wish there was some other way to remind the player that you need to deposit the medal without taking up so much space. Or maybe it's just on the player to remember after they've been told once. As for the UI, when you upgrade your health or ability gauge, it doesn't seem to get any longer, just stuffs more segments into the bar you already have, so don't freak out if you buy an upgrade and the change isn't immediately apparent. When it comes to sound, the OST is freaking amazing. Each track is a bop, and they would get stuck in my head at least once a day for a few weeks following my initial 2 runs. And remember how I mentioned that each segment of the game is broken up into 3 stages? That doesn't mean that the music is getting recycled. You start out with a track that's perfectly suited to the area you're in, and when you move on to the next zone, you get a remix version. Then, when you go to Zone 3, you get yet another remix, but this one is a collaboration of the main composer, T. Lopez, and a guest, giving it something unique, and these variations tend to be the most robust. The whole soundtrack is worth a listen on its own, and there's a ton of subtle little touches thrown in that someone better versed in music than me could pick out. But I did love how one of the tracks for the Frozen Temple, I believe Zone 2, had a touch of that one type of woodwind sound that I associate with ninjas and media, which is perfect since that's the area where you face off against Ice Kunai. In a similar vein, I like the sound effects. The collision noises when you bounce off enemies are basic, but they do feel like they have weight. The scan and shoot with Mindbuster makes a cute little phew, and zipping around feels, looks, and sounds satisfying. There's also some voice acting, not for everything, mostly just stock stuff for attacks, transformations, and introductions, and these fit right in with the Saturday morning vibes. A lot of them strike me as the sort of thing that would be fun to say on the playground when you were in elementary school. But not today. I'm definitely not yelling out, "Lightning Justice!" and "Go Berserk!" at 9 p.m. in my room every night. Nope. No sir, certainly not. The difficulty is broken up into 2 ways. Modern, in which you have infinite retries, and Retro, where you have a life counter and enemies are a bit hardier. I kinda like this way of doing things, since there's less pressure than an easy and normal or normal and hard situation. That kind of language makes it feel like there's a right choice. Normal is how you're expected to play, while easy is for babies and hard is for people who take themselves too seriously. With these descriptions, you're just told what's on offer and left to decide based on your own preferences. Well, I say that, but choosing Retro has the game inform you that there aren't any extra achievements for doing so, like it's calling you out for being tryhard. Still, I do think it's a nice way to lay things out. As for general difficulty, the gameplay is easy to pick up, but requires some effort to master. When I first saw a video for Berserk Boy, I'll be honest, I was pretty intimidated. All the dashing and attacking, constantly being interwoven, made me think that it would be more than I could handle, but I managed to stumble through my first playthrough. For my last one though, which was on Retro, I was moving really well and stringing together maneuvers to the point where I was happy for the stronger enemies, since it allowed me to rack up more hits and do more complex combinations. Not only that, but I had picked up a lot of the tricks with the different forms and their upgrades that I was having fun trying to figure out where I could get away using one in a situation designed for another. And I love it when mechanics feel like they were designed to let you break the game if you're clever and practice enough. Berserk Boy is definitely the sort of game that you not only get better at the more you play, it becomes more fun as you do so. That said, I do have one tiny issue with the difficulty, the Berserk medals. They're just kinda there during your initial run without much context, but when you get the normal ending, you're told that you need to collect 50 of the 75 to advance further. I want to say that I spent almost 2 hours running around through the levels again, desperately trying to put together the amount necessary, and it really got under my skin. The weird part is, I kinda figured they'd do something like that, and was planning on going back to collect everything, or at least as much as I could, so this shouldn't have been that big of a deal. I think why this bothered me so much is that the normal ending is such a non-ending that I didn't even realize I had reached post-game, which made it feel like a necessary part of the experience that had just been dropped on me without warning. That's another fault of the writing though, and maybe just sticking some credits here rather than saving them for the true ending would have fixed things. Am I really that simple? Anyway, there's also a new game plus that I initially misunderstood. It said that it would let you bring everything over, which I thought meant I would retain all the upgrades I previously bought, though I might still need to unlock the orbs they pertain to. But not only did it start me out with all the different forms, but all the upgrades, even the ones that I never purchased. This makes collecting Berserk medals all the easier, since you don't need to remember where there's a side path that you need to come back to later. I had minimal backtracking my second playthrough, which was a New Game Plus Modern run, though I was so traumatized from my first that I spent a lot of time obsessing over them. Feel kinda bad since I streamed that one. My next two, I didn't need to revisit a level at all, even when I did a regular retro run, so it's really only a problem your first go round, when you're still finding your footing, and since I've warned you, it should be much less of a problem. I would definitely recommend starting out with Modern to get yourself acclimated. The game also throws a few curveballs at you that I was able to enjoy, but would have really ticked me off instead had I been worried about lives. If you get through Modern and had fun, that's when you want to hit up Retro and see what you can really do. During my initial playthrough, I felt really clumsy and probably would have gotten a fair number of game overs had I not been on Modern. But when I did graduate up to Retro, I only found out that losing warped you back to Kay's room because I think the life counter glitched out on me. Oh, that's right, you can get up to 9 lives, but there's an invisible counter that keeps track of extra ones in the background. I died a few times at 9, but upon coming back, I didn't see it drop down to 8. Since I'm pretty sure I didn't die more than a half dozen times when I got the game over, I think I might have gotten so many extra lives that I reset the counter. That's right, I lost because I was too good at the game. Wish I had been recording that one so I could have reviewed the UI to confirm. On the whole, I think Berserk Boy is balanced well enough that most can enjoy it, getting through the majority of the game without needing to bang their head against the wall. And while a few of the last stages might be a bit tough, using Modern mode should hopefully be enough to get casual players through them. And the game still has enough going on that the more serious players can get really into it, messing around with the different abilities, retro and new game plus modes, NDX stages to challenge themselves, and get a lot more out of the experience. Take it as lightly or seriously as you want. Just mind the Berserk medals. With great power, do not be a jerk. Take up justice as your life's work. Stand up for what's right, don't run from the fight, and give a cry of go Berserk. I'd recommend Berserk Boy, so it gets a limerick. I really like the game, but I still have enough gripes that I wouldn't put it on the same level as Cuphead or Shovel Knight. The crazy thing is, though, that I'm pretty sure a follow-up would be. The gameplay is fun, the level design is interesting, it has great replay value, the visuals are pleasant, and the music rules. When you get to the credits, they're pretty short, so the team seems pretty small, a few names seeming to pull double or even triple duty when listed out. I can feel a lot of passion behind it. The Twitter account promoting it like mad, stuff is getting fixed through patches rather than being left as good enough, and it's gone on sale a few times in the short period it's been out to tempt people in. Berserk Boy is an incredibly good first outing, and I'm sure that if the same people were to make a sequel and sand off the rough edges, not only would it blow the first game out of the water, it would be up there with the platforming greats. This is pretty much the strongest recommendation I can give without going up to Sonnet, it being just short of that. If I can make a request, please give this game a look. It's a ton of fun and I think most fans of the genre will enjoy it. I also want to see it succeed so we can get a sequel. While I'd normally consider expecting one a little presumptuous, given that the team behind it is called Berserk Boy Games, I think it's a little more likely than something brand new. It's only $20 on Steam and Switch, sometimes less, which I think is a really fair price. But hey, if you've already played it or were at least considering it, let me know, along with your own thoughts. And if I manage to convince you to pick up a copy, well, be sure to tell me that. No need to give me a commission, just a Berserk Boy 2 sometime down the line. With that, thanks for watching, and maybe consider subscribing if you're into platformers, especially of the mega variety. Go Berserk!